I always believed that karma is real, but I never thought that karma would come in the form of a man whose face is exactly like my ex-lover, with a 20-year age difference and the status of being the son of my best friend. My name is Riena. I am 42 years old. I am a loyal wife, a devoted mother, and the best friend that Mama Mira, my best friend, trusts. But I keep a secret that is now slowly but surely eating away at all the foundations of my life. Don't judge me, I am just a lonely human being. Listen to my story until the end, and try to feel in Mira's position. What would you do? Or worse, in my position, can you refuse a destiny that feels so sweet but poisonous? I met Mira in college. She is everything that I don't have: cheerful, outspoken, and always surrounded by many people. I, on the other hand, tend to be quiet and like peace. But strangely, we click, we exchange secrets, promises of life and death. Even when we got married, our houses are only 2 housing complexes apart. My daughter Siska is the same age as Artie, Mira's son, Artie. Ah, Artie. She has been like my own child since childhood. She has always spoiled me. Her nickname is not Aunt Riena, but Mother Riena, because I and Mira often takes turns taking care of Artie's father's child. Uncle Harris is busy with mining work outside the island. My husband Fandi is also often on duty outside the city. So it's practical that Mira and I support each other amidst my husband's busy schedule. This conflict has begun to creep slowly like moss on a damp wall since Artie graduated from high school. Artie chose to study engineering in a city far from home. Mira, with all the typical worries of a mother, asked me to visit Artie often. Not because I don't believe in Artie, but Artie is the type of child who is too innocent, too naive, and Mira is afraid he will fall into the wrong crowd. Rian, I entrust Artie to you. You are more relaxed. Visit him once in a while. Make sure he doesn't play with strange girls or hang out for no reason. I only trust you, Mira asked one afternoon with pleading eyes. I smiled reassuringly. Mir, just think of Artie as my son too. I will definitely visit him often. Besides, I also miss the atmosphere of the boarding house like when we used to. I joked without knowing that the sincere promise would become a tangled thread that strangled. My first visit to Artie's boarding house felt normal. We ate soto on the side of the road. I tidied up his room. A bit messy, but when Artie changed clothes in front of me, thought I had left the room for some reason, my heart was beating erratically. He was only wearing basketball shorts, and his body movements, his shoulder muscles that were starting to form, reminded me of my husband Fandi 20 years ago. But this was more than that. There was an innocent aura mixed with masculinity that made me have to hold my breath. I quickly left the room. Artie was a little polite. Auntie is still here. I scolded. My voice sounded louder than I wanted, trying to cover the strange turmoil in Artie's chest. Just grinned. Sorry, Mother Riena thought you were already outside. He said. The grin made his eyes narrow just like my ex's. That's when I started to realize this was no longer just watching my friend's child. This was a test for my heart, a test that came from the emptiness that Van left because he often went away, the emptiness that began to be filled by innocent gazes, as well as gazes full of admiration from Artie. I started to go to Artie's boarding house more often at first, once a week. Then it became twice a week. My reasons were always the same: checking his food, making sure he was studying, or just bringing home cooking. Mira thanked him endlessly. Never suspecting anything, our interactions became more intense, but still within safe limits, until one night in Artie's 3rd month of college, Fandi was on a big project in Kalimantan, and Mira was back home visiting her sick father. I was completely alone at home. The silence was suffocating. I felt like I was drowning in my own house without thinking. I called Artie not to tell him to come home, but Artie, Auntie has urgent business near your boarding house. Auntie will stop by later. Okay, just stay overnight and tomorrow morning, Auntie will take care of something at the post office nearby. I said the excuse I made for it felt bland to my own ears. Artie sounded happy. Wow, it's fun, just stay overnight, Tan. Artie, so you won't be lonely? He replied cheerfully. That night when I arrived at Artie's boarding house, it was quiet. Artie was taking a shower. I sat on the small sofa. My heart was beating erratically. I knew this was wrong. I knew my intention wasn't just for the post office business. When Artie came out of the bathroom, he was only wearing a thin t-shirt and shorts. His hair was still wet, dripping water that wet the shirt on the shoulder. The scent of masculine soap from his body immediately filled the air of the narrow boarding room. The pause in silence felt like the loudest music Auntie Riena. "Why is her face so tense?" asked Artie innocently while drying her hair with a towel. I pretended to be busy checking my phone. Nothing is wrong, Auntie. Just tired, want to sleep quickly." I lay on the folding mattress that Artie prepared on the floor. Artie slept on his mattress. We were back to back, but I couldn't sleep. I could hear every breath he took. I could smell his soft body scent. The silence was slowly killing me. I started to think about how far I was from Fandy, how cold our marriage had been lately. I started to miss a presence of warmth that I no longer felt, and now that warmth was only 1 meter behind me. I turned around. Artie was asleep, his position carelessly, his legs bent towards me. His blanket had slipped, revealing a little of his hard stomach. In the dim night light, he looked very vulnerable, but also very alluring. My eyes were glued, my head was buzzing. This was the curiosity that I used to feel often as a teenager, but this one was mixed with a piercing sense of guilt. Suddenly Artie moved. He squirmed and his eyes opened. Our gazes met in the darkness. There was no surprise, just a silent confession. Riena had not slept. Her voice was hoarse, like waking up I could not answer. I could only stare at him. The shame and turmoil I felt made my cheeks heat. Artie smiled a little, a meaningful smile, a smile that seemed to know what I had just done. He whispered again. His voice now sounded deeper, more mature. "Be careful, Tan, you will get addicted." My heart felt like it had been hit by a sledgehammer. He knew I was looking at him, but why was he smiling? Why wasn't he angry? I quickly turned my back on him again. My body was shaking. My mind was in turmoil that night. Sleep never came to me. I realized the boundary between me, Mira's best friend, and her child, Mira, has started to crack. And the worst thing is, it seems Artie also realized the crack after that night, after the whisper, "Be careful, later you will be here," from Artie. I tried to avoid the guilt that pressed me like a pile of concrete. How could I, Riena, a woman who always upholds loyalty and friendship, be tempted by my own best friend's child? The child I myself helped bathe when he was a toddler. I reduced the frequency of visits, which used to be twice a week, now only once, and even then I made sure it was only for a short time during the day. And I always took my daughter Siska, so that there was a barrier between me and Artie. But fate seemed to have its own scenario. Every time I tried to distance myself, Artie actually got closer. He started sending me short messages, not only about college, but trivial things, sunset photos at his boarding house, questions about my favorite cooking recipes, or just stories about the movies. He watched our interactions on the phone, felt much more intimate than with my husband Fandy, whose short messages were never more than work matters, and monthly money transfers. One afternoon I was sitting daydreaming on the porch of my house. My phone vibrated a message from Artie text message, Riena's mother. "Why, it's unusual that I haven't visited Artie's boarding house this week. It feels really quiet. Artie misses Riena's mother's cooking. If you're busy, it's okay, but please send a photo of your mother so that I can be motivated to study." Reading the message, my heart sank. On one hand, I felt touched. There was someone who missed me, not because of obligation, but because of his desire. On the other hand, I knew this was dangerous. The request for a photo had gone beyond the boundaries of a child and an adoptive parent. I didn't reply. I tried to strengthen myself. I had to remember Mira, my best friend. I had to remember my wedding vows. I had to remember that Artie was only 19 and I was 42. This 23-year difference wasn't a romantic story in a movie. This was an abyss of sin ready to swallow me. 3 weeks later, I managed to keep my distance until that night. Fondi called from Balikpapan. He said there was a sudden problem with the project, and he had to extend his work period for the next 2 weeks. Fandi's voice sounded tired, but there was no warmth that I missed when I hung up the phone. My tears fell. I felt alone, abandoned, and unwanted. 8 p.m. When I was contemplating my fate in the living room, there was a hasty knock on the door. Artie stood in front of the door, carrying a large backpack. And Artie's panicked face. "Oh my gosh, what's wrong? Why did he suddenly come home?" I asked, confused. Artie looked right and left to make sure no neighbors saw Artie's mother can stay here for the night or not. Artie's boarding house was hit by a small flood because of the heavy rain. Artie's mattress was wet, and Artie didn't know where else to go. His reason sounded reasonable considering the heavy rain had just stopped, but there was something in his eyes that made me suspicious. His gaze wasn't the panicked gaze of a student whose mattress was flooded, but a gaze full of hope. Why not just go to Mira's house?